Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Office 365 Key Features webinar, sponsored by NSCA. My name is Juan Cuellar, and I am the Senior Instructor at Office Pro. Now, just wanted to give you a little background information about us before we jump into today's webinar. Established in 1984, Office Pro has over 30 years of experience specializing in professional services and has trained over 1 million people worldwide. Partnering with industry leading companies such as Microsoft, CompTIA, Crestron, PeopleCert, and Pearson VUE, just to name a few, Office Pro provides training, end user adoption program, certification prep, and test center services on a wide variety of disciplines such as software, information technology, soft skills, professional audio video, and collaboration. Now, Office Pro also offers workforce solutions through staffing and recruiting for short term or long term professionals on help desk, administration, analysts, business process initiatives, human resource, or security personnel. All right, so enough about us. Let's go ahead and jump into today's webinar. Now, let's start off by talking about Office 365, also known as Microsoft 365. First of all, these are terms that for the last couple of years, we've heard them around the office. We may have even used them, but not fully had a clear understanding of what it is. So let's start off with some of the basics today. What is Microsoft 365? Well, it's so broad that it's kind of hard to describe, but here's how I like to describe it. Microsoft 365 is essentially Microsoft's subscription plans that includes access to Microsoft Office applications plus other productivity cloud solution services. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Microsoft Office. This is the suite of applications we've been using for the last couple of decades. You know, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. So it's going to continue giving us access to those applications plus some other cloud solution services. Now, the cloud, what does that mean? This is another term that's been rolling around, and sometimes we're not all quite clear on what that means. So let's take a look at that. So, what does cloud computing or in the cloud actually mean? Essentially, for us as end users, it's just a metaphor for the internet. So the phrase cloud computing means a type of internet-based computing where different services, such as servers, file storage, or various applications, are delivered to our computers or devices over the internet. So let's go full circle. Microsoft 365 is a subscription that gives us Office and other cloud solution services such as servers, file storage, or applications that we can access over the internet. Now, when we're talking about the wide variety of different Microsoft or Office 365 services, it's very broad. Now, let's take a look at a few just to kind of get a good idea. Now, part of Microsoft 365 is Exchange Online. Now, if you're familiar with Exchange, you may know that Exchange is the server that manages everything in Outlook. Well, now that's hosted online. We also have SharePoint. We have Microsoft Teams. As mentioned earlier, we'll continue to have Office. We'll also get other services such as OneDrive. You may have Planner, Stream, Forms, Yammer, Lists, Power BI for business intelligence, and actually the list goes on and on and on. But these are just a couple of the popular ones. Now, while each one of these services and apps, for the most part, can work independently and they have their own purpose and functionality, a lot of times, one of the cornerstones of Microsoft 365 is collaboration. And there's a specific feature in Microsoft 365 called Microsoft 365 Groups. Now, these groups are a collaborative or shared environment for groups or different teams of people that are working together to collaborate on. And what these groups do is they draw resources from a variety of the other services for the benefit of that group's collaboration. Now, a lot of times these groups are referred to as different terms. So, for example, in Outlook, where we can have a shared mailbox or a group mailbox. But again, now that we understand this concept, realize that that shared mailbox is just part of the overall group that may have some of these other resources. Now, some of our SharePoint sites may be team sites that are associated with groups. If you have some experience in Microsoft Teams, you may have already been working with teams and channels. Well, recognize that the teams and the channels is just a subset of this bigger feature called Microsoft 365 groups. And again, those may have some of these other resources that are associated with it. Now, this is just good information for us to know, but today we're here to take a look at what are some of the key features that we need to be familiar with to get up and running with Microsoft 365. So let's talk about some of the key features that we're going to focus in on for today's webinar. Now, I briefly mentioned the Exchange server. It's now Exchange Online, meaning it's hosted through this online platform. Now, there are benefits to us as the end users, which we'll take a look at in just a bit. We'll also have Microsoft Teams, and this is essential for us to understand what are the core functionality so that we can get up and running with it. But what about our files? Well, for that, we have OneDrive. Now, essentially, OneDrive is your very own private online document library where you can store your work-related files. And we'll go into deeper details of each one of these in a second. But another key element is SharePoint. Now, essentially, SharePoint is an online collaboration platform, completely dedicated just for that. But it does integrate with some of these other elements, as we'll see today. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to continue to have access to the latest and greatest updates to Microsoft Office. Now, that includes the applications that are installed on our desktops, as we've known them for many decades. But now we have a new iteration called Office Online. These are also referred to web apps, which are companion versions to the desktop applications, but they allow us to load those through the web and do the majority of our work there if we choose to. Now, again, it is completely up to you if you want to use the standard desktop applications or now the new online, and we'll see the pros and cons for each. Now, let's start off with the first one. The first thing we need to know how to work with is our email, right? How do we get to our email? How do I check out my schedule? How do I keep track of my tasks or my contacts? Well, for that, let's talk about Exchange or Exchange Online. Now, Exchange Online lives in the cloud. Now, for us as end users, what does that mean? Why is that a benefit to us? Well, now that Exchange lives online, it does not matter what our current circumstances. I might be working on my standard office computer. I might be in a different office. I might be borrowing a colleague's computer. Maybe I'm working on the go from my laptop, or maybe working from home on my tablet or even mobile device. The whole concept of cloud computing is that as long as we have access to the internet, we'll have access to all of our resources in the cloud. Now, if you're working from your standard work computer, you can continue to use the standard old Outlook application. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, and you're more than welcome to continue using that if you prefer. But what about some of these other scenarios? Maybe you're in a different computer where Outlook isn't set up, or maybe you're working from home or a different device. Well, now, remember those online apps? While we have the standard Outlook desktop application, we'll also be able to use the online app from any device that's connected over the internet. And if we're working with mobile devices such as a tablet or a smartphone, we'll be able to download the, the mobile apps for those if we wish to. So let's take a quick look at how we can access it. Now, I know for the most of us, we're pretty familiar with how to use the standard desktop application. So for today, for the most part, we're going to focus on how can I work with Microsoft Online in these alternative situations where maybe I don't have access to some of those standard applications. So let's pretend I'm working on this computer where I don't have Outlook set up. Well, as we can see, we can access it online. So let's take a look at how to do that. Now, when you want to access it online, you just simply open up your browser, and there's only one website that you need to remember whenever you're trying to access any of Office 365's services. The website is simply office.com. That's it. If you can remember that, you're golden. Now, when you go to office.com, if this is the first time you're logging in, it may ask for you to sign in. So I'm going to click the sign in option in here, and it'll prompt you for your work email address for your sign in. So I'm going to log in as one of my training accounts here. Now, once you provide your sign in, you'll click next, and of course, it'll ask you for your password. So you provide your password and click sign in. Now, it may ask if you want to stay signed in. What this means is that if you want your browsers to remember your credentials so that next time you try to get in, you don't have to log back in. If this is a work computer or a computer that is just exclusively for your use, you may want to do so. If this is more of a shared computer or a public computer, you definitely don't want that, right? So you choose your option, and you are now in. Now, when you log into office.com, it brings you to what they call the portal, Microsoft 365 or Office 365 portal. Essentially, what this means is this is just the front door to get into that environment. Now, over here, it's going to recommend some files that you may be interested in continuing to work with. You'll have access to all of the different resources, and this list can get pretty extensive. You'll have different categories to choose from. But what I want to bring your attention to is notice down the left, you'll have this little column which gives you a couple of the most popular options. Now, from here, you can click Home, which brings you to the portal. You can create a wide variety of different elements from documents to presentations, spreadsheets, list items, all sorts of things. You'll also be able to access all of your content and then some of the more popular applications. Now, if I'm simply trying to access my email, you'll notice that from the left column here, I can click Outlook. Now, notice how it's not launching the Outlook application on my computer, but rather it's opening up Outlook Online. And again, this is a great feature for when you're working on a device or during a scenario where you don't have the standard application available. Now, let's see some of the core functionality that we have. One is email. Notice how it automatically took me to my inbox. And from my inbox, notice I can see all my emails. I can click on an email that I need to check up on. Notice I see an email from my colleague Dwight, and he's asking if I got a chance to finalize the presentation. Now, let's say I want to reply to him. All I got to do is click reply, and I'm going to say, yes, I will send that to you later today. And since I'm logged in as Sheldon, I'll sign it off as Sheldon. Now, notice there's a toolbar across the bottom if I want some formatting options. There's a second toolbar with some additional options. But if I'm ready to send it, just click send, and there it goes. But what if you need to initiate a new email? Let's say I want to email my colleague about the budget. Well, notice on the top right, I have the option for a new message. And notice how it always tries to keep it here in the reading pane. But if you prefer to have it open in a separate window, you have this button here that you can click on if you prefer to compose your emails that way. Now, of course, you can address it to your colleagues or whoever you're trying to email. And I'm going to call it budget updates. And I'm going to ask him, can you please review the attached budget and let me know? Now, notice how as I'm typing, there's a feature called autocomplete. So Microsoft 365 has built in AI to help you and streamline your use of it. So it's using predictive text and it learns your habits and how you speak, how you write. And if it's predicting correctly, notice how I can just press tab to have it auto-completed for me. Now, as I keep on typing, let me know if, notice it predicted, if you have any questions, which is exactly what I wanted to say. So press tab, so that can really streamline the process for you. Now, I'm going to, again, sign it off as Sheldon. Now, to attach a file, notice there's a little paperclip icon on the bottom. I also have the attach option across the top. Now notice I have a variety of different options to choose from. Now I know that my file is in OneDrive, which is a cloud location. So I'm going to select Browse Cloud Locations. Notice it shows me my OneDrive. Now it's showing me the recent files I've worked with. And in fact, this is the budget I want to send. But just in case you don't see the file you wanted, you simply click Files. You can navigate to where your file is located under the Financials Documents folder. Here's that budget. I can select it to attach, click Next. Now notice it's giving me an interesting option here. I can share as a OneDrive link. And notice it says that the recipient will be able to see the latest changes and work together in real time. So in other words, I am giving the recipient access to the file in my OneDrive so we can work together from there. Now, if I don't want him messing around with my copies, I can simply attach it as a separate copy. So he has his own, I'll have my own. I'm going to go ahead and just share it as a OneDrive link. That way we can all collaborate together. And notice how it's attaching it, creating that link. And now I can click send. So notice how easy it is to check your email, reply to email, create new emails. Now, what else do we do in Outlook? We keep track of our schedule, right? Well, you'll notice that down the left-hand side, we have all of these different icons. Now, when I clicked on Outlook, it by default took me to my mail. And of course, I have all my other folders listed here. But if I keep going down the left, here's my calendar where I can pull up my schedule. Now, you'll see that I can pull up all of my meetings that I've had. Notice I just came back from vacation a couple of weeks ago. I have an upcoming fall conference budget meeting next week. So I can always pull up my schedule and take a look at it. But what about scheduling something new? Well, just like creating a new email, on the top left, I can click New Event. And here it is. Now, let's say I want to create a budget review meeting so I can get together with Dwight and update the budget before our meeting next week. So I give it the title. Notice it says invite attendees. So I'm going to invite my colleague Dwight. There he goes. Now, notice how immediately it's giving me suggested times because it's looking at both my availability, Dwight's availability. Now, the first thing I may want to do is select a date. So I'm going to select tomorrow. And again, notice how it updates the suggestions, and we'll go with 1:30 to 2. Notice how over on the right it updates, and if there were any other meetings here, I'll be able to see them just to see if there were any conflicts. Now, under the location, if I needed to reserve some kind of conference room, I'll be able to do so. But what if we're working remotely and we want to meet online? Well, notice that's what team meetings allows us to do. So we're going to go into greater detail of this in just a bit, but if I check it, it now makes this a team meeting. I can add more details if needed, but I'm just going to click send. And notice that now that meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. Now, much the same way, I can also access people. Now, people are essentially the contacts that you have in Outlook. I can go through the contacts. I'll have all the contact information. I can contact them here. I can create new contacts. But notice there's another little icon that looks like a little paperclip. Now, this is a really interesting feature that they've implemented in Outlook Online, and hopefully they even implement it in the future in their regular Outlook, because I find it quite helpful. If I click Files, notice that it's going to load a list of files. Give that 1 second here. Now, you may be thinking, files, well, what about these files? What are these files that you're looking at in Outlook? Essentially, these will be all of your attachments. Now, I see that it's still trying to load. Let me try it one more time here. Let me do a quick little refresh. All right. So if you receive any attachments, if you send any attachments, and you want to see every attachment in your mailbox, that's what this feature here does. Now, notice Microsoft is telling me, look, we're having a little hiccup here, so we'll come back to this in a little bit, but I find that this is a very helpful feature when we need to just find all the files that I've either sent or received. Now, you'll notice that there's another icon here with a blue checkbox. Now, it's called the To-Do. Now, the To-Do is a separate app, but it actually integrates with Outlook. Now, under To-Do, you'll be able to see any tasks that have been assigned to me from a separate app called Planner. Now, that's a topic for a different day, but notice if I am keeping track of any tasks for myself in Outlook, I'll be able to pull that up. I'll be able to update them, such as mark them as complete, or I can create new tasks, such as run billing report. Once I create the task, I can add more details. Let's say this is going to be due next week, and I'll add a reminder to myself next week. Nice and easy. Now, let's say that's an important task, so I'm just going to star it to mark it as an important one. So as you can see, guys, it's super easy to access all of your Outlook resources, whether you want to check your email, your calendar, your contacts, or your tasks, when you may not have access to the standard Outlook application. So again, it just adds flexibility to your work process. Now, let's move on to the next one. Next, we want to talk about OneDrive. Now, OneDrive, as I mentioned earlier, is your very own document library that resides online. Think about Dropbox. Some of you may be familiar with Google Drive. So this is Microsoft's version, OneDrive. Now, similar to Exchange, OneDrive lives in the cloud. So again, regardless of your situation, as long as you have internet access, you'll be able to access the files. Now, again, if you are on your standard work computer, you can synchronize your OneDrive with your computer so that you can continue to use a familiar interface and access your files through File Explorer. But if you're in a different situation, you'll be able to access them online or through the mobile app. Now, let's talk about how the sync works. So as I mentioned, if you do set up OneDrive Sync, which if it's an option for you, I highly recommend, when you open up File Explorer, which anybody on a PC should be familiar with, you'll now see your OneDrive, and it'll say OneDrive dash, and then your organization's name. Now, that will show you all of the files that you have stored online. Now, let me show you what that looks like. So if I open up File Explorer on my computer, so notice down the left, here is my OneDrive Office Pro, and here's all the folders, all the files. I can open up those folders and access the files within them. But I want to draw your attention to this column here called Status. Now, this status indicates, of course, the status of the files. But what does that even mean? Well, let's talk about those statuses. Now, first of all, the default status is the blue cloud. Now, the blue cloud indicates that that file resides exclusively online. Now, if you have internet access at the moment, you'll be able to double click the file and open it locally. Now, once you open up a file locally, that status will turn into a green check. Now, that green check means that it has now temporarily been downloaded locally to your C drive. And if you happen to be offline, you'll be able to access it still, because again, it's temporarily downloaded so you can access and edit it locally on your computer. But as it needs to make more space on your hard drive for other files that you access, any files that have this green check has the ability to be offloaded to make space for other files. Now, if there are some files that you need to make sure you always have access to, regardless if you're online or offline, maybe you're traveling and you need certain reports accessible to you, well, you can make it available on your computer at all times, and you'll see this green circle with a green check. Now, again, it'll still synchronize online when you're online, but if you are not online, it'll ensure that that file is available offline and it won't be offloaded. Now, there are going to be times where you see these little arrows. That means that it is actively syncing those files online. Now, from time to time, you may come across this red circle, and that means that it was not able to synchronize. Sometimes there's hiccups in the internet or some other issue. Sometimes you may need to address discrepancies, but most of the time they kind of take care of themselves once you get a good connection. Now, one of the interesting things about OneDrive is that you are able to share files directly from your OneDrive. Now, by default, all the files are private just for you, but we are able to share them, and that's when you are going to see the people icon. So for example, let's go back to my File Explorer here. Remember that budget I just shared through that email? Well, if we go into the folder, notice how it has that little people icon telling me that that file has been shared with someone else. You see that? So from here, you can just double click on any file, open it, it'll open up through your standard desktop application and go from there. However, let's go back to some other scenarios. So remember, what happens if you are not on your standard computer? Maybe you don't have access to that synchronized options. So let's talk about how can we access it online and how do we work with it? Well, let's go back to our browser here. Now, when I opened up Outlook, it opened up in a separate tab. Now, I could go back to the original tab and look for OneDrive here, but let's pretend I closed that one. Now, another very important part of Office 365 is called the application launcher. A lot of people call it the waffle because that's what it kind of looks like. Notice how on the very top left, I have this icon that looks like a little waffle. And it does not matter what area of Microsoft 365 you're in, you'll always have this application launcher or the waffle where you'll always be able to toggle back and forth between all the different apps and services. From here, notice I have OneDrive. So when I go to my OneDrive, notice here it is. Immediately, I see all the folders, all the files that I have stored in the cloud. And if you look closely, this is the exact list of files that are being synchronized to my computer through that OneDrive Sync. So again, you have both options on how to access the files. It all depends on what is your preference or what is your current situation. Now, since you're familiar with how to work with File Explorer, let's see how to work with it online. Now, let's say I know I'm going to need to upload a couple of files, but I want to organize them in a separate folder. Notice that across the top, you have a little toolbar, and I can click New. From here, I can create new folders, new files of various formats. Let's start off with a folder. Now, I was just assigned to a new project called the Fall Conference, so I'm going to create a folder to manage all the files there. I can click Create, and just like that, I have the Fall Conference folder. Now, I may have files already that are stored somewhere else that I now want to save in my OneDrive so I have them available regardless of my current circumstance. So what I can do is I can open up the folder and then I can use this upload option to upload files related to that folder. So I'm going to select Upload Files. Now, you can navigate to wherever you have those files stored. And from here, I'm going to select a couple of files here and then click Open. After a second or two, you'll notice that those files immediately start uploading. Now, another option is if you open up File Explorer to where those files are stored, let's say I have some information about the venue, I have all of these pictures, information, the floor plan. I want to upload all of that whole folder. Notice that besides using the upload option, you can also drag files and folders into your browser. I'm going to take the whole venue folder and just drag it into the browser. Give it a second or so, and you can see that all of that content is now being uploaded into my OneDrive. Now, I want to show you how, as I'm manipulating content here through the browser, remember we mentioned that my OneDrive is currently synced to my computer. So watch this. If I go back to my OneDrive here, eventually I'm going to see that new folder called Fall Conference, and I'll be able to open up that Fall Conference folder and all of the content I've uploaded. Now, depending on how much content you've uploaded, it may take a minute or so to update, but we'll come back to this in just a minute and verify that everything looks good. All right. Now, besides uploading existing files, from time to time you may need to create files, but create them right there through your browser. So once I am in my files, I can go back to New, and I'm going to select Word document. Now watch closely. Notice how Word is not even open on my computer yet. And if I click New Word document through the browser, now notice how it's launching Word not on my computer, but rather through the browser. Now this is what I was referring to earlier as web apps or online apps. Now notice the interface looks somewhat similar. We have tabs, we have ribbons, with all the different tools that are available here, and I can start creating that content. Let's say I need to keep track of the guest speakers that we're going to have come speak at the fall conference. And let's say we're going to have Bonnie, John, and Barbara. Now, I can even format the content here. Now in Word, my preference is to use styles when applicable. So I'm going to click in guest speakers and I'm going to apply the title style. I'm going to go under the list and apply the heading 1. And let's say I want to bullet the guest speakers. So here's the bullet, and you can see I am ready to go. Now, one of the interesting aspects of working with these online apps is that everything is saved automatically. So at this point, everything is already saved. And I can see that it confirms that right here across the top. But notice how if it saved it automatically, it never prompted me for a file name. Well, when you're creating files through the web, it gives it a default generic name. Notice it called this document. That's a little too generic for me, right? So the nice thing is you can rename it right here on the spot. I can click where it says document. Here's the file name. I'm going to rename it to guest speakers and then press enter. And I have now effectively renamed that file. Now, if I'm finished with the document, I can close it, but I'm looking at the styles that are available and I'm thinking to myself, I'm not a big fan of these styles. Maybe I want to choose a different style set, another set of document formats, another theme. Well, I'll tell you what, these online apps are great for quickly getting in, getting some basic editing done, and getting out. But sometimes they do kind of limit what you can do through the web app. So let me show you how, if you need to or just prefer to, you can switch over to the familiar desktop application that we've been using for many, many years. So as I'm editing, all I have to do is go to edit, and notice I have the option to open in the desktop app. Click on it, give it a second or two. Notice how it's launching Word, and just like that, it opened up that exact file through the desktop application, and I now have the full robust functionality of these desktop applications that I'm familiar with. So now, some of the features that I didn't see online were under the Design tab. So if I want to change the theme to something else, I can do so. If I want to change the style options, notice I have different style sets. I can make whatever changes I need. Maybe I'm going to add another guest speaker, Felicia. So the point is, now that I've opened it up through the desktop application, I can just continue editing it from here, and I know I'll have the full functionality of the app. Now, remember how I mentioned that everything you do in the online app is automatically saved? Well, guess what? That's also the case in these updated desktop applications. Notice how across the top it's telling me that it is currently saving all the changes that I've made. Now, once it's finished, all I got to do is close it, and I can rest assured that all the changes have been saved in my OneDrive. Now, since I'm finished with my guest speakers, I can close the web app as well. And notice here is that brand new file that I just created. And notice it reflects that it was modified just a few seconds ago. Now, while I was able to share a file by emailing it to my colleague, what if I want to share this new document that I have here with my colleague, and I don't want to have to go back to my email and create a new email and do that? Well, I don't have to. Notice that if I point to any file or folder, I get this little arrow next to it. So if I want to share my guest speaker document with my colleague Dwight, I can click this little share icon, and I'll have different sharing options. If I click on that option there, notice it gives me 4 different categories. It says, who do you want this link to work for? Do I want it to work for anyone? Now, anyone means anyone in the whole world. That's a little too loose for me, right? Now, anyone in your organization, maybe I don't want to share this document with everyone in my organization. Now, if I've already shared it with other colleagues, but maybe they lost the link, I can use the share with people with existing access. Or if this is a new share, I can share it with specific people. Personally, this is my preferred option. Now, after you select your option, you have different settings. Do I want to allow them to edit the document, or do I want it to be read-only? Do I want them to be able to edit it or only edit in review mode? And then if I don't allow them to edit it, I can choose whether they have the option to download their own, or I can block that download if I only want them to be able to access it online. So again, I have many options to choose from. I'll select my preferred preferences, click apply, and then it says, okay, well, who do you want to share it with? So again, I'm going to select my colleague Dwight. I can add a message if I need to, or I can just copy the link and send it through some other method, or I can have this initiate a new email through Outlook, or the most streamlined option is just have the system automatically send them an email notifying them that I've shared this document with them, and it'll provide them the link so they can click on it and access it for themselves. Now, let's talk about a great feature called versions. Now, if I go back to my financial documents, this document here, this budget, I know I've edited it multiple times. Now, in OneDrive, there's a feature called versions, which allow you to keep different iterations of a file every single time it gets modified. And what that allows you to do is to go back in time and see what the file looked like, or even restore it to one of those versions. Now, the first thing you want to do is select the file, and then on the toolbar across the top, you may need to click the ellipsis to expand it, but notice here's the version history. And notice it's giving me a list of all the versions this spreadsheet has gone through. Now, notice it's the latest version, which is version 4.0, is the latest one. The earliest one is version 1.0, which was created June 22nd of 2020. So you can see this document has gone through many different iterations. Now, to see the latest one, I just click on the file name. But if I want to see an older version, let's say I want to see version 100, I can click the version number. Now, older versions will always open through the desktop application. And let me pull that over here so you guys can see it. So notice it opened up that budget so I can see what the file used to look like at that version. Now, there's an important point I want to make here. These older versions are not editable because they're for reference purposes only. You see that? However, if I'm looking at some of these later versions and maybe we got confused, maybe we messed it up, one of my colleagues that I shared it with deleted some content, or maybe the file went corrupt, that's another great use of versions. I can go to an earlier version and restore it by clicking this ellipsis, clicking restore. Now watch what's going to happen. Remember, the latest version right now is 104, but if I restore version 100, notice the latest version is now 105, meaning that version 100 was restored, being made into the next version, which is identical to version 100. So essentially what we did is we overwrote whatever was done from 101 to 104. And so now that is the version we can move forward with from that budget. So there you go, guys. That is OneDrive. And again, this is a great place for you to manage all of your work-related documents. All right, let's keep on going. The next category we're going to talk about is SharePoint. Now, first of all, what is SharePoint? Well, as we mentioned earlier, it's simply an online collaboration platform that can be used in many different use cases. One, it can be used as the company intranet. It can be used for project management or team collaboration. Now, how do we access SharePoint? Well, just like OneDrive and Outlook, it's an app that we can access online. So again, going back to the waffle, you'll notice there is the SharePoint app. And the SharePoint app will show you sites that you frequently visit, sites that you have chosen to follow, or sites that you've recently visited. You see that? Now, once you find the site that you're looking for, let's say we created a site to keep track of that project fall conference. So I'm going to click on it from here. And I am now in that fall conference SharePoint site. It's that easy. Now, again, it's an online collaboration platform, but in SharePoint, and by the way, SharePoint lives online just like everything else. So again, regardless of your situation, you'll be able to access it through the web. Now in SharePoint, we have these things called content structures. Those are simply the containers, and they come in two different categories, if you will. We have libraries and lists. Now, libraries is a place where we can store, track, and manage files and documents. Let's take a look at how to do that. Now, remember how I said that OneDrive is your personal document library? Well, in a SharePoint site, we'll have a default documents library, and we can have additional documents library as well. The key difference is that the files in these libraries no longer belong, quote unquote, to you. They belong to the team that's collaborating in that site. So notice here we have folders, we have some files, and just like OneDrive, I can create new folders, I can upload existing files. So let's say that I want to share some of the files that I have stored in my OneDrive or on my desktop. So I can go to Upload, Files, and again, I can select whatever files I want to share and then click Open. Give that a moment or two. And as you see, it's very similar to OneDrive. Again, the key difference is that these files are available to the whole team who has access to that site. Now, much like I did in OneDrive, I can click on a file, open it, edit it, save the changes there. I can open it in the desktop app or the online app. We still have version history here as well. So it's a very similar environment. But what about lists? So if SharePoint libraries allow us to store, manage, and track files and documents, well, lists allows us to store, manage, and track groups of similar items, or better put, information. Let's see a couple of examples. In preparation for the fall conference, we needed to keep track of the schedule. So notice here we have the schedule. And this is simply a calendar of events. We needed to keep track of the guest speaker's contact info. So notice down the left, we have all of the guest speakers, and we've added all of their contact information. But we also needed to keep track of tasks in preparation for the conference. So notice we have assignments that we're keeping track of here. So these are tasks. Now, we can also, now these are created with what are called little templates, but we can also create custom lists. Now, as part of keeping track of the fall conference, we needed to keep track of the guest speakers, or excuse me, not the guest speakers, the registrations. So notice from here, I have a custom list called registrations, and you can see that I'm keeping track of who's attending, their status, what days they're attending, whether they provided payment info, what department they work for, all sorts of info. Now, let's say I want to register somebody new. Well, similar to a library, notice we have the new button, but in this case, it's not going to create a new file. It's just a new list item that collects all the information this list is designed to collect. So let's say I need to upload Barbara Smith. So Smith, Barbara, ID number, we'll just put 1324. Notice under departments, I can have a drop down of different options. I can give her whatever status she is. Attending, yep, she'll attend both. Now, let's say Barbara hasn't gotten approval yet, so we're not going to provide payment info quite yet. We'll come back to that later on. Click Save. And just like that, Barbara has been registered. Now, again, the nice thing is that all of this information is now in this collaboration environment called SharePoint. Everybody who is a member of the site will have access to that info. All right, with just a few minutes left, let's go back and take a look at the last category that we want to talk about. So far, we've talked about Exchange and Outlook. We've talked about managing your files in OneDrive, collaborating in SharePoint. We saw how to edit through the Office Online apps and the Office apps. Last but definitely not least, Teams. Now, what in the world is Teams? Well, Teams is the central hub for all work, all communication, and all collaboration. Now, again, it too lives in the cloud. So, what that means is, regardless of your circumstance, if you're on your regular computer, you can use the Teams desktop app. If you're working through a different device, you can use the Teams online app. Now, if you're on a mobile device, you can download the Teams mobile app as well. Now, there are some core functionality in Teams, and that's what we want to briefly talk about today. First of all, as we just discussed, the Teams app comes in 3 different flavors: the desktop app, online app, and the mobile app. Which one you use really depends on your circumstance. If available, I do recommend the desktop app because it will give you the most robust experience, kind of like we saw with Microsoft Word. Now, one of the core functionality is chats where we can conduct our day-to-day communication. So for example, if I have a simple question for my colleague, I don't have to write an email. I don't have to walk across the campus or the building to talk to them. I don't have to call them. Check this out. If I open up Teams, down the left-hand side, I have the core features, and here's my chats. Notice I see a list of the recent chats, but to start a new chat, I click on this icon across the top here, and it's going to ask me, well, who do you want to chat with? Well, remember my colleague Dwight, right? Let's say I'm going to ask him if he's going to be at the meeting tomorrow. So notice I can see all the conversation history we've already had, but across the bottom, I can click new, type a new message, and I'm going to say, hey, will you be at the meeting tomorrow? And then I can just press enter. Notice it sends that chat right away. Now, if my colleague sees that message, because he will get a notification, he can start responding. Maybe he's going to say, yes, I will be there. Now, notice as he's typing, I see this little icon down here letting me know that he saw my message and he's responding. When he sends his response, it should pop up on my end. Notice I get a little pop-up, and great. So notice how easy it is to communicate. I don't have to go write up a whole email or call them or visit them in their office or cubicle, just like that. Simple, straight to the point. And usually this provides us with a much quicker response than email or other methods of communication. Now, what about this next option? Teams. Now, if you remember, we mentioned that in Microsoft Teams, when you're working with a team and channels, you're actually working within a group that may have some of these other resources available. Well, let's take a look at Teams. Now, in Microsoft Team, the application, down the left, we have the button called Teams. And you can see a list of the teams I am a member of. Now, teams are made up of channels. Channels allow you to have different conversations on various topics, yet still related to the team. So for example, under human resources, I see we have a general channel, benefits, corporate updates, events, job opportunities, onboarding, payroll, and recruitment. Okay. Under the training team, notice I have the general channel, new course ideas, outlines, registrations, virtual programs. Now, let's say I have a question for the team that's collaborating in the training department. I'm going to go to the registrations and I'm going to ask, where can I access the registration form to register for a new class. So notice I can click Start a New Conversation, and I'm going to type in here, where can I register for a new class? And then I'm going to hit Send. Notice that posted a brand new conversation there. Now, the difference between the post in a channel and the chat that I just sent is that the chats are considered private conversations, while the posts and channels are, I don't want to call them public conversations, but they are available to every team member. So if one of the team members has any information regarding to that, they can reply. And let's say my colleague Dwight saw that post and he's going to say, you can access it from the HR site. And then when he hits respond, or when he responds, notice I will get a notification. Notice under the activity, it briefly popped up here and it tells me Dwight replied, and I can see his reply right there. And I'm going to just give that a thumbs up, letting him know that I saw it and I liked his response. So you can see the teams and channels are for group collaboration. Now, let's move on to the next category. Let's go back here. Let's go back to our teams. Let's hear. So we've seen these three. We have two left. Meetings. Now, if you remember, when I scheduled a meeting, a budget review meeting with my colleague through the Outlook Web App, I mentioned that it should be a Teams meeting because team meetings allow us to conduct online meetings. Similar to the platform that we're on right now, we'll be able to get together virtually. So let's see how to work with them. Now, I'm going to go back to Teams, and you'll notice that down the left here, I have a button called Calendar. Now, this calendar, just as an FYI, is identical, is the exact same schedule in your Outlook calendar. It's just two different places to access your schedule. And you can see that that budget review meeting that I scheduled with my colleague Dwight is here. Now, if I want to schedule a new meeting, let's say I want to schedule an all hands-on staff meeting. Well, from my calendar, I can click New Meeting. I can name it here, staff meeting, add all of my attendees. So let's say I'm going to add Dwight, Penny, and Phoebe. And just like a standard meeting, notice that I have all the standard features. I can select the date. Let's say we'll schedule it for next Monday. We'll schedule it for, let's say, 10 a.m. and we'll have that be an hour and a half. And all of the other additional information, for example, the notes or the details, I'm going to say, please have your status updates ready. So notice it's just that simple. I can click Send. And again, now if I go to next week, there is that staff meeting. All right. Now, the last topic is files, because we mentioned Teams is a central hub for all communication, collaboration, but all your work. So all of the files that we've been working with, notice that Teams has a section for that here. Under Files, you'll see a list of all the recent files you worked with. You'll see a list of files that you have shared through your Teams, and all the files through your OneDrive. Now, check this out. Remember that budget? Well, under Financial Documents, here's the budget. And if I choose to open up any one of my files, notice how they open up right here through the Teams app. So now I actually have three places to edit my files. The desktop app that we've known and loved for decades, the online app, and now through Teams. and I can go in here, make any changes that I need. Let's say this, we had some expenses, so I'm going to put that to 3,000. And again, anything that we do here saves automatically. So once I'm ready, I can just close the file, and I know that that budget has all those updates. All right, guys, well, guess what? That is the Office 365 key features. All right. Now, oh, excuse me. One second here. All right, now to wrap up today's session, just want to mention that if you or your colleagues are interested in any of our services, you are more than welcome to contact us. You can write down this contact information, and if you're interested in any of our services, whether that's recruiting services, professional audio video, or end user adoption or training, you're more than welcome to contact us. I want to thank you all for attending today's class. And what I'm going to do is we're going to open up for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you are more than welcome to unmute yourself, or you can post them in the questions pane. Now, I know that there was at least one question posted in the questions pane. So I'm going to take a look at that. But if you have any additional questions, you are more than welcome to let me know. Now, I see a question that says, can you be logged into multiple Outlook accounts? Now, I'm assuming you're talking about the through Outlook Online. So if you have access to different Outlook mailboxes through that same account, it's really easy to toggle back and forth between the two. Let me pull up Outlook Online to show you where you would go to access that. Now, I'm opening up Outlook Online, and you'll notice that once I am in Outlook Online, on the top right, you should see your account here. Now, when I click on it, notice there's an option that says open another mailbox. So maybe there is a shared mailbox, or a colleague has shared their mailbox with you. That is one of the better ways to do so. Now, notice once I'm here, if you truly are trying to access a completely different account, there is the option to sign in with a different account here. So those are your two options that you have. Okay. Now I see a comment that says, I missed part of the presentation. Will there be a recording? Absolutely. This session is being recorded, and and we will be sending out the recording so you can watch it at a later time.
I have a question. Can you hear me? My name is Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. Yes, tell me.
I've got my project manager. He's on his way in here, but he was, sorry, come on in here, David, so we can hear you better. He was using...
I was using OneNote. I've been doing quite a bunch of note-taking, a bunch of site surveys, pictures, all that other stuff within OneNote. And now my OneNotes are disappearing on me.
Yeah, OneNote can be a little tricky. Now, let me ask you this. Were you using the OneNote application on your computer?
I was using it on my iPad, yes.
On your iPad. Okay, so then if they were on your iPad, I can assume they were saved online. Now, if they were saved online, it can be in one of two different places, either in your OneDrive or in some kind of SharePoint site. So here's what I would recommend.
Currently, it is all mapped to my OneDrive. I have not been able to get my iPad to link to a shared drive, but it is all on my OneDrive. Mm-hmm. I've been sharing it out with other people from there, and all that's been working great. But then recently, I mean, at this point, I even went back and I can't see anything earlier than this past March.
Yeah, okay. So here's what I would recommend. So remember the waffle I mentioned on the top left that gives you access to all of the apps? Notice here is the OneNote Web App. The
Yeah.
OneNote Web App can be used to access any of the notebooks you've been using that reside in the cloud. Now, the nice thing is when you open up the OneNote Web App, it shows you some of the more recent notebooks you've been working with. It gives you
Yeah.
the name of the notebook and their location. So if you're not so sure exactly where your notebooks were that you were working on, somewhat recent, this is where I would start off and look. Now,
I've looked through all of that. I've checked in my notebooks. I've checked even on my OneDrive directly, and I can't find them anywhere in there.
Do they disappear after a certain time frame, possibly?
absolutely not. They should not be deleting automatically. They it's just like any other file, like a Word document. Word documents are not going to be deleted automatically. But again, I understand because it can be a little tricky to understand exactly where they are. So this is where I would look. If not, I would go to my OneDrive and then I would look in there and see if there is anything in there. Now, I ask if you were using your OneNote Desktop app because if you're using your OneNote Desktop app, let me open that up here, and you have a list of notebooks already here. One of the options you have is to go to the Files tab under Info down the left. Notice you'll have the list of all the notebooks, and this too will tell you where those notebooks reside. So that might be another little tip into locating where the notebooks are that you were using. Okay.
Okay, I'll try all that again. I've looked in all that, but I still have yet to be able to find them again.
All right. All right. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you for your help, Juan.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Yeah. Now, I see a question that says, I would like to add a recurring task to the task by planner. How can we make that happen? That's a really good question and actually a really common question. Unfortunately, tasks under the planner app cannot be made recurring. It is one of those things that, and actually I've gotten this question many times before. It's one of those things that we're providing Microsoft this feedback that we need that ability. I know you can create a recurring tasks in Outlook, and you can actually assign Outlook tasks to others, but again, it won't be part of your plans in Planner. Okay, so it is one of those things that we're looking forward to. Hopefully, Microsoft implements it in the near future. Okay. All right, so I see a comment that came in and says, "Look, Juan, you've been sharing files from your OneDrive, but what if at a later time you no longer want those individuals to have access to those files?" Well, the files in your OneDrive, you have full control of them. They're your files. So if you want to quote unquote unshare them, let me show you how to do so. So I'm here in OneDrive. And under my fall conference, if you remember, I shared my guest speakers. Now, here's a little tip for you. Under OneDrive, notice there's a column. Now, OneDrive Online, not OneDrive through your computer. Notice this will not, well, this will show you if this will tell you if it's shared with that little icon. But when you are in OneDrive Online, there's a column that says private, private, private. Again, all the files and content in here is private by default, but when you've chosen to share it, this is where you can see that. And if I click here where it says shared, notice that here I have the link that I created when I shared it with my colleague. And it says this link, people you specified can edit. Now, who did I specify? Well, right here, it says Dwight. Now, I can edit this link or I can get rid of it if I no longer want Dwight to have access to it. So what I can do is click this little settings button here, the gear. Now again, I can change its configurations or I can just click the delete icon to remove the link, delete the link, and that's it. Now I'm the only one that has that file, access to the file, and if I close it and refresh my screen, notice that that file is back to private. Now, Dwight will still have that initial email that was sent to him with a link, but simply that link will no longer work. So again, I know that that's a very important part of sharing in OneDrive. Good question. All right, any other questions?
Hi, Jan. It's Mo here.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks very much for going through all that. It was awesome. Lot to take in, but as you said, it's recorded, and we can go back and watch it again if we need to. Now,
Absolutely.
I need to know the application or the software was used to record this web or use this webinar. It's GoToWebinar
Yes, sir.
application, I take it. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it has a very good features where it gives you the option to move the slides up, down, side by side.
So I will say that that is not actually a feature of the platform we're using. It's just the method that I've used. So I can play the presentation, and just by using a couple of keyboard shortcuts such as Alt Tab, I can switch over to the different windows or Windows tab. I got a little thumbnail of all the different windows, but you can do that in any platform, whether you're using Zoom or WebEx or Microsoft Teams or the platform that we're on now.
So the one we're using now is GoToWebinar, is it?
Yes, that is correct.
Or is it? I know I've used in past GoToMeeting.
Yeah, so similar to like a meeting versus a seminar, right? This was more of a webinar. It's more of a one-way presentation, one-way conversation until the Q&A at the end. But if it's more
Yeah.
of a collaborative meeting where everybody's going to chime in, that's what GoToMeeting would be used for.
GoToMeeting, right? Great.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, you too. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? All right, well, I've taken up a couple of extra minutes of your time, so I do appreciate everyone joining. Again, if you want some more information about our services or are interested, so for example, if some of the attendees, if they're interested in some training on OneDrive or OneNote or SharePoint, any of the topics that we've discussed here, or our recruiting services or pro audio video services, you are more than welcome to contact our Vice President of Client Engagement, Beth Chernoff, and we'd be more than happy to work with you. Thanks again for joining, and have a great afternoon, everyone.